With summer officially coming to close, that only means one thing. Postseason baseball is right around the corner. Unfortunately for the Phillies, they're keeping their regular September tradition of doing everything they can to miss the playoffs. Luckily, the other two teams we'll be covering are doing pretty well. This is Sports Talk Philadelphia. Welcome back. I'm Aidan Tyksinski, and I'm joined by unusual panelist, Siobhan Nolan. Siobhan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today, Aidan. I get to talk about the Union, so couldn't be better.
Very exciting stuff. And then we've got Matt Dorenzo back. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm super excited to be back.
Good to have you back. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to go into Eagles talk. The Eagles had a great game Monday night playing against the Minnesota Vikings. They won that game 24-7, and Jalen Hurts put up a career night, 330 passing yards. No passing touchdowns, but he did have a rushing one, or 3 total TDs, 1 passing, 2 rushing. Miles Sanders had 17 carries for 96 yards, and Devontae Smith led the team in receiving with 7 receptions and 80 yards. Jalen Hurts did a much better job in this game spreading the ball around the field. A.J. Brown still got a lot of receptions, but a lot more guys stepped up. What were your guys' thoughts on how the Eagles did this game?
It's definitely a more convincing win than they had last week. You know, like you said, Jalen Hurts did amazing. So it's good to see that it's only the second game of the season, but he's able to make that jump and make those improvements that we wanted. And 24-7 on Monday Night Football against the Vikings, I mean, you can't really ask for anything better, especially after they kind of squeaked by last week.
I mean, it was phenomenal. Like, this same Vikings team who just made Aaron Rodgers look like a mediocre quarterback. We came out there and we held them 7 points total offense, forcing 3 turnovers. Jalen Hurts looked like the MVP quarterback we all wanted him to be. He had those 2 rushing touchdowns where literally it came down to it, where he powered his way into the end zone, and he found Kez Watkins on a 52-yard streak wide open down the field. So honestly, it was a really fantastic outing from the Eagles, and I'm just looking forward to it next week.
You know, Jalen Hurts was definitely amazing, as you said, Matt. He also passed for 333 yards, like I said, which tied McNabb, I think, for the most record for a QB starting in like his second year, whatever it was. It was absolutely amazing what he did. There was a little bit of a down note for the Eagles, and it has to be the amount of penalties. Specifically, Jordan Mailata has just not looked the same this year as he did last year. He only had 3 penalties, or he has 3 penalties already this season, which ties him for second most in the NFL. He's had 1 false start, or 1 false start, 2 holdings. He just hasn't looked the same. And I'm wondering, is there any reason why the huge drop-off, considering how great he was last year?
Yeah, I think right now it might be just a little rust, because I do think Jordan Mailata would be one of the better left tackles in the league, and he's proven it in years past. He's proven why we gave him all that money. But it's not just him; it's the whole line. I mean, I was at that game Monday night and watching the game where you had a 15-yard run play, a 15-yard pass play, and every time you'd be called back to the illegal man downfield. I don't know if that's because Sirianni's not teaching him that the RPO is different, but either way, Mailata, the whole line together has to be a little cleaner going forward.
Yeah, no, 100%. There was another player that really stuck out of this game, and his name is Darius Slay. Slay was absolutely amazing, especially in the red zone, completely shut down Justin Jefferson, who torched the Packers last week. Darius Slay had 2 interceptions, 5 passes defended. He held Jefferson, like I said, 6 catches for only 48 yards, and both of the interceptions were also in the end zone, which is just a huge X factor for the Eagles defense. How does Darius Slay line up with the best cornerbacks in the NFL?
You could say Darius Slade. This is why they don't put me on Eagles Talk, but holding Justin Jefferson to, you know, the constraints that he did, that is honestly amazing for a player that's widely being regarded as one of the best in the league. So for him to be able to confine a player like that and a good Vikings team just shows that he has unlimited potential for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think the big talk of the offseason was Darius Slay actually getting that captain patch on his chest awarded for the first time in his career. And so far this year, he's proven it. We did go out and get James Bradbury, a nice compliment on the other side of the field, but he shut down arguably the best receiver in the NFL last Monday, and he should have had 5 interceptions. He had 3 dropped, 3 pass interference, and the 2 he had were phenomenal. And I do want to point out to Avonte Maddox going up and climbing the ladder, another interception in the red zone, and that was just phenomenal to watch. A great stellar Eagles defensive performance.
Yeah, Avonte Maddox was great. The defensive line looked really good. This was just a total defensive win by the Eagles, as well as the offense played. And that's such a huge improvement over Detroit. Do we think that this is a jumping point for the Eagles, or is this just a fluke game for their defense?
I don't think it's a fluke game. I think it's a good indicator of what can come. Maybe it's not like, oh, they're going to keep up performances like this the entire season, because you always have to account for off games with the Eagles. But I think they're definitely headed in a positive direction, and it shows that they're really getting everything together, and they can take, maybe not so good games like they had against Detroit and make improvements and then have more convincing wins the next week over.
I think those absolutely step in the right direction for us. I mean, going forward, we have Washington this week. We play Jacksonville next week. We have a struggling Cardinals team coming up. Our schedule down the line is easy and easy and easy. And if we can start getting rolling, we can see an Eagles team possibly being 7-8-0. And I'm so excited for it.
Yeah, that would be definitely great for the standings. And you look at the early NFC East standings after 2 weeks, it's definitely a bit of a doozy. The Eagles are 2-0, which a lot of people expected. But then the Giants are second at 2-0, which is a bit surprising. The Commanders are 1-1. And the Cowboys won with Cooper Rush as their quarterback instead of Dak. The NFC East, for the first time in a very long time, is actually looking like one of the better divisions in football. Does this worry you guys about the Eagles' chances of making the playoffs?
I think with the Eagles and the team that they have now, obviously it's early in the season, but a lot of the players are stepping up, doing their jobs, doing what they need to do. So while, it is a pretty close standing as it stands right now, I think that the Eagles really can make a good push and still stay on top the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't let these teams' records fool you. The Giants, they won both games by 3 or less points. There was a fluke on the missed field goal. The Panthers' offense has just been abysmal. That's why they won that game. The Commanders, they have looked good with Carson Wentz under center, so I'm not going to say anything to that because we play them this upcoming week. And the Cowboys, Dak being out, it dropped their chances drastically. Other than CeeDee Lamb, I couldn't even tell you another guy who catches the ball than Dalton Schultz, and not even he's hurt now. So that win against the Bengals, it had to be a fluke. The Bengals have some Super Bowl hangover. They have some Super Bowl little rust coming off them, so I'm not too worried about the Cowboys winning that game. Realistically, the Eagles are front runners to win this division.
Definitely 100% agree with you, especially the Cowboys getting that game out. The Bengals' offensive line is just terrible, like flat out. It's just not good. So that's basically, I think, the main reason why the Cowboys won that game. The Eagles do have a really big game in a certain way coming up this week, playing the Commanders, 1 o'clock on Sunday, first time facing Carson Wentz. This is a team that I think is actually is a little bit under the radar, especially the way they played in week 1. Yes, they lost to Detroit, but I think Detroit's actually a pretty good team. How do you guys see this game lining up this weekend?
I mean, you can't take any game lightly. There are no really easy games in the NFL. So, first time facing Wentz, it's going to be not a tough time per se, but just, we know how good Wentz is. We know how well he can play, so that can be maybe a little bit of a tough point. But I think there's a lot of value in just keeping the faith and letting this good run of games boost confidence so that they can go into the Commanders game with, a lot of confidence, a lot of motivation, and hopefully raise their record to 3-0.
Yeah, I just find it funny how it's their first time playing Carson Wentz, and that's a big headline. But I think it should be Jalen Hurts' first time starting against Carson Wentz as the headline, because he's the one who took his job. He's the one who proved to be a better quarterback. And I was a big Carson Wentz fan. I love the guy. He's a big part of our Super Bowl run. But he's shown time and time again that he's not that good quarterback under pressure. And there's going to be a lot of pressure riding on this game. A first divisional game on the Commanders, his first time playing the Eagles since he left. So realistically, I think we go out there, and I think Washington has let up 29 points a game this season. I think we double that, and I think we put up around 45, 50 points.
Wow, that's a bit bold, but I like the thought there. So the Commanders as well have a lot of decent weapons as well. Some of them are well known. Terry McLaurin's obviously probably the best one. They've got some other guys as well. Who's your biggest concern going into this game?
Probably going to be Antonio Gibson. You saw week 1, DeAndre Swift really ran all over us. Last week we did better containing Dalvin Cook, but I think going into this week we really focus on the run game with Antonio Gibson.
All right, so quickly before we wrap up, who do you guys have winning this game, and do you guys have a score?
I mean, I definitely think the Eagles have it in them to win, and hopefully they can keep getting the points up and keep winning by a large margin. So I'm going to agree with Matt and hope that they get up into the at least 30-40s range. I think that's pretty realistic for them against the Commanders.
Well, last week I picked the Vikings to win, and that did not go well. So hopefully, I'm going to pick the Eagles this week, so hopefully that goes well for us. That wraps up Eagles talk. We're now going to go into the more disappointing out of the 3 teams we're going to talk about. The Phillies have had a really, really bad week. First, they got swept in Atlanta. They've lost 5 of their last 6. It's just been a really terrible month for them. they've got a lot of injuries. What's really happened to them that they've just completely looked like one of the teams that was a lock to make the playoffs to now being one of those teams that could potentially miss it by the end of the season?
I mean, it's the September curse, and obviously you can't blame it on a whole month, but this sharp drop-off is not uncommon for the Phillies. And I hate to say that maybe their hot streak kind of got to their heads a little bit, and maybe the pressure was just too much, but such a sharp drop-off is definitely going to put them in trouble. And I definitely think that, it's the curse of September. I don't know if it's the playoff pressure. I don't know if it's, just too many wins get to their heads. But it's really disappointing to see because they were on such a good streak, and now all of a sudden they're dropping off.
Yeah, in the MLB season, there's 3 things certain: death, taxes, and the Phillies blowing a lead in September. Right now, they have 81 wins. They did win last night against the Blue Jays, so I guess that's a good step in the right direction. Going forward, we play 4 against the Braves and then 4 against the Nationals, which hopefully we can try and split with the Braves, because right now it's not looking too good for the Phillies. The Padres did pass us in the standings, but I'm not worried about them. I'd rather have the 6th seed anyway, but we'll get into that later. And the Brewers being behind, I just need the Phillies to just win games. I don't care how you do it, just find a way to win a game, and we'll see ourselves in October.
Yeah, they did get to 81 wins, so they only need one more to get over 500 for the second time since 2011. So I guess that is a little bit of a positive note. But the thing is, like with the Phillies, this is the 3rd managerial guy who's been the manager for them, and they're still collapsing. Is it a manager thing? Is it a clubhouse thing? Like, what do you guys think is the biggest? Like you said, obviously the September curse. It feels like it is now a real thing. But is there something Rob Thompson can do to just light a fire under these guys to push them way into the playoffs?
I don't know if there's anything specific he can do, because the fact that we haven't seen the playoffs since 2011, and right now we're kind of only in the wild card standing because they expanded the playoff format. It's something that seems to be a more systemic thing. I don't think going through manager after manager is going to fix anything. I think Rob Thompson has proven himself to be someone who they can keep in the role, and I think that they shouldn't rush to any rash decisions in firing him just because this isn't his season. He took over unexpectedly, and I'd like to think it's not a clubhouse thing, because we haven't heard any bombshell like, oh, this guy is ruining the team chemistry, but it just seems like there needs to be an overhaul of the whole system, because clearly something isn't right, and it hasn't been right for over a decade. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, which makes it all the more frustrating that they're not doing well.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really think it's a clubhouse thing or more of a managerial thing. I think it might just be a mental block. Obviously, like guys like Bryce Harper, Gene Segura, Rhys Hoskins, Aaron Nola, you want to see these guys make the playoffs because they haven't been there in the whole career. And the whole stigma of the Phillies fans being the hardest fans in the world, we know we haven't been there in 11 years. We know they have been choking leaves in September, and they know we know. And I think right now it's just them trying to go out there and do too much, because obviously the Phillies have home run hitters, but that's all they try to do. Like Matt Vierling went 5-5 last night. That was perfect. We need that small ball to win us this games late in October. And right now the Phillies don't have that. So hopefully going forward we can get some of our leaders like Harper and Hoskins to just get the team on the right page and win games going forward.
Yeah, so the other thing that's been sort of under the radar story for the Phillies is the demotion of Noah Syndergaard to the bullpen. Obviously, we talked about Syndergaard last week. He was someone that got traded to the Phillies in the middle of the season. He was supposed to be one of their best starters. He's now just hasn't looked that good. 1-2 in his last 4 starts. And Bailey Falters just looked great as the 5th pitcher for the Phillies. He's been 5-0, 2.36 ERA in his last 6 starts. So obviously, Syndergaard pitched last night in the bullpen. He did pretty well. 3 hits, no runs in 2 innings. Was this a smart move by the Phillies to put Syndergaard in the bullpen?
I think it was a pretty smart move, because obviously Syndergaard was supposed to be this big money signing, and he was this big name that they got, but he didn't live up to the expectations that they needed him to, and you can't coddle that, especially at a time when they are trying to make playoffs. So while it's disappointing to see him demoted to the bullpen after all the hype that surrounded him, I do think it was the right decision considering his performances since they did trade for him.
Yeah, I don't necessarily hate the move, because we do have Zach Wheeler back and Eflin as well, who was back a few days ago, and Bailey Falter's been phenomenal. So for us to go in and take him out of that rotation after he has a 5-0 in his last 6 starts, something we can't do. And even in October baseball, when the innings get a little shorter, So we shorten our rotation a little bit, and we do see guys who usually start going to the back of the bullpen. And hopefully Syndergaard can be that guy, because we all see what he can do in New York. We all see what he can do in the postseason. And him going back to the bullpen, either being a complimentary to Eflin or complimentary to Wheeler, would be phenomenal for the Phillies going forward.
So Zach Eflin could possibly be back for the Phillies in time for the postseason. If that happens, they might go to a four-man rotation, might go to 5. I'm just curious, who would you guys rather have to start in a playoff game, Syndergaard or Falter?
I would want to keep Falter just because I feel like a lot of back and forth and changing out this guy for this guy. At this point, with the performances they're having, I don't think all of that changes is too smart. Falter has been doing amazing, so I think they should let him continue. And unless he really starts to mess up and not pitch well, I think he's definitely earned the right to stay in the rotation.
Yeah, I'm a big adamant of the stay with the hot hand, and you should go to Falter here. But Syndergaard has that experience, and Phillies really don't have much experience on the baseball team when it comes to postseason play. We know Schwarber has a few rings. We know Syndergaard was on that Mets team when they went to the World Series. So technically, you could have him in there just to have some guy to bump up your rotation. But right now, it's up in the air between him and Falter. I just want to see how Falter does past week of the season.
So quickly before we wrap up the Phillies, they're obviously a game and a half behind the Padres for the wild card. They're 2.5 up on the Brewers. Do you guys think the Phillies make the playoffs this season?
I think it's possible, but the hope is dwindling a little bit. So I'm going to say yes, but they really have to step it up to earn a little more confidence in the fans. And I think no one's expecting them to go far in the playoffs if they do make it, but hopefully they can just squeak in there.
They're going to make it. They're going to beat the Braves tonight. They're going to sweep the Nationals. They're going to get all worrisome out. They're going to clinch a game before that Astros series, and we'll be soon sailing into a red October.
Matt, I like your confidence. I don't feel the same way, but I like your confidence. So now we're going to go into a team that we haven't really talked about too much on this show, but it's one that deserves to be talked about because of the way they played. We're going to go talk about the Philadelphia Union. The Union, for people that haven't been following MLS soccer, they have been great this season. They've been great in the last couple of seasons, but especially this year, they've just been phenomenal. Especially recently, they've won 5 out of their last 6 games. In 4 of those games, they've scored 6 goals and are now the first team in MLS history to score 6 or more goals in 4 games in a season. And their most recent game was a little bit more disappointing. It was a 0-0 draw to Atlanta, but still they haven't lost in 6 games, which is just great to talk about. So Siobhan, I want to go to you for a sec. What has been so great about the Union, especially recently?
There's just so many good things to say about them. They, like you mentioned, their record, they've scored more than 6 goals in 4 games, all of which were shutouts as well. So their defense, you can never say enough good things about. Andre Blake, best goalie in MLS, and the 4 in front of him are just a solid brick wall. You have the great center back pairing of Jacob Glesnes, Jack Elliott. You have Olivier Mbaizo on the left. They've had some rotation on the left back or the right back as well. But just to see the defense being so consistently good is obviously a plus with any soccer team, but they have a great midfield. They have great strikers. They've added a lot of depth and a lot of young players as well, so they're definitely investing in the future. And just Jim Curtin, he's been at the club for 7-8 seasons now, and he was such an under-the-radar kind of signing when they first brought him in, but he's really stuck with the team. He's really changed the entire culture, and now they are the best team in Philadelphia. You cannot convince me differently. And they're putting up such a convincing run for both the MLS Cup and the Supporters Shield. So I said it last week, if you're not already a Union fan, you're missing out because they definitely have the best shot at a title of any city team this season.
So you mentioned Andre Blake. He's been awesome. He's played all 32 games for the Union, 14 shutouts, 100 saves. How important is it for the Union to have a goalkeeper that they can rely on, especially in closer games like the 0-0 draw in Atlanta and a couple of the other games where they didn't score 6 goals every single time?
Well, because Andre Blake, he's just a freak of nature. He's not just any typical goalie. If you see some of the saves he makes, they're absolutely insane. You just think, how can a human being stretch that far, jump that high, get fingertips on the ball to save it? He saves penalties as well. He communicates well with the defense. He's the alternate captain when Alejandro Bedoya isn't in the starting 11. So he's just established himself as such a leader and a respected figure. And the talent and the pure ability this guy has is insane. you haven't seen anything like him before. I don't think we'll ever see anything like him again. So we just got so lucky that we drafted him and that we've been able to keep him because he's such an anomaly in the best way possible.
So not only the Union played well recently, but like I said, they played well all season. They're currently tied for first place in all the MLS. If they get in first place for the other season, they'll win the Supporters' Shield, which goes to the team with the best regular season record in points. They're also first in the conference ahead of CF Montreal by 5 points. How are you feeling about the Union making it to the playoff? They're obviously going to make it, but do you think that they could win the Supporters' Shield? How do you feel once they get into the playoffs?
They were the first team to clinch a playoff spot, which is really good. They went in first. They're still in contention to get the first seed and have a bye week once the playoffs start. Supporters' Shield is a little dicey because they're going up against LAFC for that, and LAFC has just been an incredible team as well. So Supporters' Shield, they've already won it. I'm not too concerned about that. The MLS Cup is what matters because they had such a good run for it last season, but against NYCFC, in the final push for it, a lot of the players got COVID, so they didn't have their starters in that team. And I believe that if we had a fully healthy team, we would have won it. And something doesn't sit right with me that NYCFC has an MLS Champions banner in Yankee Stadium. Don't get me started on that. But, I mean, they've just been so incredibly amazing. They've had strong aspects in every part of the team on the field, and I just really think that this has to be the Union's year because if they don't do it after the amazing success that they've had, it's like, when can you do it after that?
So quickly before we wrap up, you've mentioned that obviously they didn't make it to the finals last year. They were super close. Yeah. Is there a team that you're concerned about in the East that could stop the Union from making it to the championship?
I mean, the Red Bulls are always a sneaky team. They're one of our biggest rivals, and they have their good runs, they have their bad runs, but with the Union, it's like teams always have to really turn it on to win against them, and sometimes under pressure, especially with so many young guys and teenagers really, that kind of pressure can make them crack. So I'm concerned a little bit about the Red Bulls. I'm concerned a little bit about just any of the Eastern teams could come and kind of upset them, but I think that they have a good team and they can push through all the way to the end.
Yeah, like Siobhan said, the Union is one of the best teams probably right now the best team in the city. It's very fun to watch. Hopefully more people pay attention. We're now going to go into one of our favorite segments, Fast Five. We're going to go with a new segment, Talking Soccer with Siobhan.
So I really want to talk about the Union's academy because that's been their bright spot. If you haven't heard the name Brendan Aronson, he's currently with the U.S. men's national team and the senior team. He's at Leeds United over in the Premier League. He's a Union product. And they've had so many good young talent. The recent 22 under 22 list for MLS came out. Union midfielder Jack McGlynn, who's 18, I believe, is number 10 on that list. Paxton Aronson, who is Brendan Aronson's younger brother, is number 12, and Leon Flack is number 14. So to have that many guys featured on the list just goes to show that the Union Academy is where it's at, and it's where the next generation of young players is going to come from. Not to mention that Alejandro Bedoya, who is their captain, made first on the 5 over 35. He's such a good captain in Philly. I think, second only Claude Giroux. He is just amazing, and to see him still performing well at the age of 35 when a lot of soccer players are thinking about retirement or already retired, it just goes to show that the Union is a team that people want to be a part of, and that no matter what age, what position, they just produce greatness no matter what.
Definitely 100%. So now we're going to go into our next question, which is thoughts on the NBA proposed rule change, the biggest one being that players can now get drafted out of high school, which means they don't have to go to college for 1 year to get drafted. Siobhan, what is your opinion on that?
I don't think that it's a bad rule to have. I think if a player is good enough out of high school, he should be able to go to the NBA. It is definitely a big culture shock and a big shift going from high school ball to professional ball, but if someone thinks that a player is good enough to do it, then I say have at it, why not? I definitely think that there needs to be support systems in place if you're bringing in such a young player to the pros, but if the ability is there and the support system from the team is there, then I think it's a great system to get more talent in the league earlier.
No, I agree with that. Matt, we're finally going to get back to you. Sorry about that. So there was a lot of great games in the NFL this weekend. What were the couple of games that you thought that should be highlighted?
Well, I mean, it has to be start off with the first game of the week was Chargers-Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. That game was phenomenal. Went back and forth down to the wire. We had other games like Jets-Browns. Jets came out of nowhere in the last 2 minutes of the game to come back and win. Raiders-Cardinals. Cardinals, same thing, came back out of nowhere. But I think the best game of the week had to go to that Dolphins-Ravens game. That game was such high scoring, such action packed. The Dolphins were down 21 points at one point going into the fourth quarter. And then Tua, everybody had a problem with Tua's arm going into the offseason. He threw for over 400 yards and 6 touchdowns last week. So I think the Dolphins-Ravens was the game of the week.
You know, that definitely was up there. I would also say the Jets win against the Browns, being down 13 with like 55 seconds left, ending up winning the game, something that's like basically never happened in NFL history. That's also be up there as well, but I definitely agree with the Dolphins game. In that game, I had Lamar Jackson as my fantasy football quarterback. Unfortunately, I still lost, even though we put up 50 points. Matt, I'm curious, how is your fantasy team doing?
Right now, 1-1. Should be 2-0, but Eagles fan Jake Elliott. I was at the game. We're already winning. He got the field goal block. That's how I lost by 2 points.
Oh no!
So that was really, really tragic to watch. But I'm confident in my squad going forward rest of the season.
So is there one guy that you're looking at right now to maybe get on the waiver wire?
Well, it has to be Jahan Dawson. I know he's a rival division guy. He went to Penn State. I'm a huge Penn State fan, and he's been looking like he's been Carson Wentz's red zone guy. He has 3 touchdowns in 2 weeks, so I think he's right now a sleeper in my opinion.
Yeah. Is there one? So do you play in a points per possession league? I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your best wide receiver right now? Because I'm really struggling at the wide receiver position.
It would be CeeDee Lamb, but since Zach's gone, so right now I
Yeah.
think Cortland Sutton's my number 1 guy.
Okay. That's good. I have Keenan Allen. He was hurt. So,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's how. The last thing we're going to touch on is the Las Vegas Aces. Won the WNBA championship this weekend, beating the Connecticut Sun. Yeah, 3-1 in their series. Vegas had a great season. They were the 1 seed after the regular season. They beat Seattle, which had Sue Bird, ending Sue Bird's reign as one of the best WNBA players ever. The other big thing about Vegas, though, is that they're coached by Becky Hammon, who's been looked at to coach a NBA team, never really got a job, was still trying to find one. Luckily, Vegas picked her up in the offseason. She did great for them, won Coach of the Year for Vegas. So hopefully an NBA team does pick her up. But, I mean, just the way that Vegas played throughout the entire postseason, they were obviously being the 1 seed, you're expected to win. But still, the fact that they had to play Seattle on a tough schedule. They also had to play the Mercury as well in 2 games. So it's just a really tough schedule. Definitely check out the WNBA next season. They've got a lot of great players, a lot of great storylines. We'll see next year if the Aces can win. I'm a New York Liberty fan, so hopefully they are able to win. And that's all we have for Sports Talk Philadelphia. We do have our social media pages now. You can check us out on Twitter and Instagram at SportsTalkLTV. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great week, and we'll hope that you tune in next week.